The massive alien ship appeared over Geneva without warning. It was 3 kilometers long and shaped like a crescent moon made of silver metal that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. People across the world stopped what they were doing and stared at their screens. The news channels went crazy. Social media exploded with theories and panic. Inside the United Nations building, Ambassador Vexitalim stood before the Emergency Assembly of World Leaders. He was over 3 meters tall with dark green scales that reflected the fluorescent lights. His eyes were golden with vertical pupils, and when he spoke, his voice came out in perfect English through a translation device on his chest. "Greetings, people of Earth," Vexitalim said. His tail swished behind him as he gestured to the holographic display floating in the air. "Your species has reached the required technological level. You are invited to participate in the trial of apex predators." The hologram showed images of creatures that looked like nightmares, things with too many teeth and not enough eyes, beings that seemed to exist in multiple places at once, monsters that made horror movies look tame. "For 10,000 of your years, the Galactic Hunting Federation has held this competition," the ambassador continued. "Each member species sends their greatest hunter. They track and capture the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. It is the highest honor. Earth may now join us." The world leaders looked at each other nervously. The military generals in the room were already making lists in their heads. Special forces operators, expert trackers, professional hunters who had taken down the biggest game on Earth. 3 weeks later, the list was ready. 50 names. The best humanity had to offer. Soldiers who had survived impossible missions. Hunters who could track anything across any terrain. Scientists who understood animal behavior better than anyone alive. Then the krill. Scout beast escaped. It happened during a demonstration at the Federation's temporary base outside Seoul. The creature was supposed to be sedated, contained, harmless. It was the size of a large dog with 6 legs and armor plating that could deflect bullets. The krill people used them for tracking across worlds. But something went wrong with the sedation. The beast woke up angry and scared. It broke through 3 security barriers and disappeared into the Seoul subway system before anyone could stop it. The military mobilized immediately. Special teams with advanced weapons entered the tunnels. They had thermal imaging, motion sensors, and enough firepower to stop a tank. The news channels showed live footage of soldiers in tactical gear moving through the dark tunnels with flashlights. 4 hours passed. The beast had injured 12 people and destroyed 2 subway cars. It was getting more aggressive as time went on. The military couldn't get a clear shot, without risking civilian casualties in the narrow tunnels. That was when Doyen showed up. Kang Doyen was 17 years old and looked like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. He was average height with messy black hair that fell into his eyes. He wore a school uniform that was wrinkled and untucked, and he had earbuds hanging around his neck. His backpack jingled when he walked, full of things that rattled and clinked. He stood at the entrance to Gangnam Station, looking at his phone with an expression of pure annoyance. Seriously, he muttered to himself. "I just want to go home." A police officer tried to stop him. "Sir, this area is closed." "There's a dangerous situation." "I know," Doyen said, walking past him. "That's why I'm here." He disappeared into the tunnel before anyone could stop him. Park Ji-won was watching from the command center when the kid appeared on the security cameras. She was 32 years old, a major in military intelligence, and she had been assigned to coordinate with the Federation during their visit. She was good at her job, which meant she noticed details other people missed. "Who is that?" she demanded, pointing at the screen showing a teenager walking calmly through the subway tunnel. "Some kid," one of the technicians said. "Security is trying to get him out." But Doyen was not going out. He was going deeper into the tunnels, following a path that seemed random but somehow brought him closer to where the beast was hiding. He pulled things out of his backpack as he walked. A small mirror, some kind of powder in a plastic bag, what looked like dried herbs tied with red string. Ji-won watched as the boy stopped in the middle of an abandoned platform. He sprinkled the powder in a circle around himself and placed the herbs at specific points around the circle. Then he took out a small metal bell and rang it 3 times. The sound echoed through the tunnels in a way that should not have been possible. It was too loud, too clear, too specific. The krill scout beast came running toward the sound. On the security cameras, it looked like the creature was being pulled by an invisible string. It burst onto the platform, snarling and ready to attack. Doyen looked bored. He rang the bell again, and the beast hesitated. Its 6 legs tangled together as it tried to change direction. The powder on the ground started glowing with a faint blue light. Salt mixed with iron filings, Doyun said to himself, like he was reciting from memory. Confuses their magnetic sense. Grandma said it works on anything that navigates by Earth's magnetic field. The beast stumbled into the circle. The herbs burst into flames, not hot fire, but cold blue light. The creature froze, unable to move. Doyun pulled out a net from his backpack. It looked handmade, woven from silver-colored thread with knots tied at specific intervals. He threw it over the beast with practiced ease. The creature struggled for a moment, then went still. "There," Doyun said, checking his phone.
"Can I go now?"
"I have homework." The entire operation took 40 minutes from the time he entered the tunnel. Ambassador Vex Talum reviewed the security footage 7 times. He could not believe what he was seeing. The child had used no advanced technology, no weapons, just simple materials that should not have worked. How did he know? Vex Talum asked the human officials. Nobody had an answer. They brought Doyun to the United Nations building. He sat in a chair that was too big for him, looking at his phone and occasionally yawning. His grandmother sat next to him. Han Masuk was 70 years old with silver hair tied back in a bun. She had kind eyes and hands that were covered in old scars. "My grandson has been hunting monsters since he was 12. Masuk said calmly. "I taught him. My mother taught me. Her mother taught her. We have been doing this for many generations. Monsters?" a general asked.
"What monsters?"
"The ones that come through the cracks," Masuk said. "Between worlds. Between dimensions. They have always come. Someone has always needed to send them back." Vex Talum leaned forward. "Your species has encountered dimensional predators before?" "We call them different names," Masuk said. "Dokebi, Gumiho, yokai, ghosts, demons. But yes, we have been hunting them for thousands of years." The ambassador looked at Doyun, who was still staring at his phone. "The Federation requires that Earth send this human. He is clearly your greatest hunter." Doyun looked up. "What? No, I have school. The medical treatment your grandmother needs costs a lot of money," Jiwon said quietly. She had done her research. "The government will pay for all of it if you compete. Full coverage. Best doctors, everything." Doyun closed his eyes and sighed. He looked at his grandmother, who smiled and patted his hand. "Fine," he said, "but I want it in writing. And if I miss my finals because of this, someone is writing a note to my teachers." That was how Earth's representative was chosen. Not a soldier or a scientist or a professional hunter, a grumpy teenager who just wanted to go home and sleep. The journey to Vornexus Prime took 3 days on the Federation transport ship. Doyun spent most of it sleeping in his assigned quarters or staring out the window at the stars. Jiwon had been assigned as his handler, which meant she had to make sure he did not cause problems. So far, the biggest problem was getting him to wake up before noon. "We arrive in 2 hours, Jiwon said, knocking on his door. "You need to prepare. Meet the other hunters. Make a good impression." "I don't want to make a good impression," Doyun called back. "I want to go home." When they finally docked at Vornexus Prime, Doyun shuffled off the ship wearing cargo pants, sneakers, and a black hoodie that said, "I paused my game for this," in English. His backpack jingled with every step. He looked like he was going to a convenience store, not the galaxy's most important hunting competition. The station was massive. It was built inside an artificial moon that had been hollowed out and converted into the ultimate hunting ground. Through the windows, Doyun could see 100 different environments. Jungles that glowed in the dark, mountains made of crystal, oceans that seemed to float in the air without containers. The opening ceremony was held in a grand arena that could hold 50,000 beings. Representatives from across the galaxy had come to watch. There were species Doyun had never imagined. Some had fur, some had scales. Some looked like they were made of light or stone or living metal. The other hunters stood on a platform in the center of the arena. Each one looked like they had been designed specifically to be terrifying. Thexvor was from the Krill people. He was 3 meters tall with a body covered in black chitinous armor. His forearms ended in claws that could cut through steel. His mandibles clicked together constantly, a sound that made humans instinctively nervous. He wore trophies from his kills around his neck. Bones and teeth and things that might have been alive once. Lysandra was a Photek, a species that existed partially in shadow. She looked almost human, except her skin was gray and seemed to flicker in and out of visibility. Her eyes were solid black. She moved without making sound, and sometimes she was in two places at once without seeming to move between them. Gormeth was a Drevnir, built like a bear, but with 6 eyes and telepathic abilities. His hunting pack stood behind him. 6 creatures that looked like wolves crossed with lizards, all connected to his mind. When he thought, they moved. Perfect coordination. Ralvex was a synthoid, a mechanical being that had upgraded their body specifically for hunting. Multiple eyes on rotating stalks, arms that could extend or retract, sensors that could detect heat, motion, sound, and things humans did not have words for. And then there was Doyen, who yawned and checked his phone. The crowd murmured. Some laughed. The human looked like prey, not a predator. The Federation's high coordinator, an ancient being that looked like a floating crystal cluster, spoke in a voice that echoed through everyone's mind. The first trial begins at dawn. You will hunt the Void Serpent. It exists between dimensions and can swallow prey into pocket universes. Capture it and return here. The first to succeed wins this round. Thexfor clicked his mandibles and looked down at Doyun. Human, you should surrender now. Save yourself the embarrassment. Doyen looked up from his phone. Do you need something? I'm texting my friend. The crowd roared with laughter. Thexivor's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of anger. The trial began at dawn. The hunters were released into the abyssal ravine, a place where reality was thin and dimensions overlapped. The Void Serpent lived somewhere in between. Thexfor immediately deployed quantum trackers, small devices that could detect dimensional disturbances. His team had spent months preparing. Every piece of equipment was cutting edge. Lysandra disappeared into shadow, becoming invisible. She moved through the ravine like a ghost, searching for any sign of the serpent. Gormeth sent his pack ahead, 6 pairs of eyes and 6 noses searching. They moved in perfect formation, covering maximum ground in minimum time. Ralvex activated every sensor in their body: thermal imaging, dimensional anchors, psionic dampeners. They had prepared for every possibility. Doyen walked to a stream, sat down on a rock, and pulled out a thermos from his backpack. Jiwan was watching from the command center with the other handlers and support teams. She had a direct video feed from a camera drone following Doyen. What are you doing? She asked through his earpiece. Eating lunch, Doyen said, pouring instant noodles into a cup and adding hot water from the thermos. Grandma packed it. It would be rude not to eat it. The trial started 10 minutes ago. Everyone else is searching. I know. Doyen stirred his noodles and took a bite. They're doing it wrong. In the command center, Federation officials were reviewing feeds from all the hunters. They saw the advanced technology, the careful planning, the strategic approach. Then they saw the human eating noodles by a stream. Is he giving up? One official asked. He appears to be. Having a meal. Another replied, confused. Doyen finished his noodles and put the container back in his backpack. Then he pulled out something small. It looked like a child's music box made of cheap plastic with faded paint. What is that? Jiwan asked. Something Grandma got at a temple sale 40 years ago, Doyen said. He wound it up and set it on a rock. Cost about 2,001. Best investment she ever made. The music box played a simple melody. Off-key and tinny. The sound drifted across the ravine. The Void Serpent exists between dimensions, Doyen explained, like he was teaching a very simple concept. It hunts by sensing disturbances in space. All that fancy equipment the other guys are using, they're making noise. Dimensional noise. The serpent knows they're coming and stays away. He pointed at the music box. This plays at a frequency that creates micro-tears in dimensional barriers. Tiny ones, just enough to be interesting. The serpent comes to investigate because it's curious, not because it feels threatened. G1 watched the scanner data. Something was approaching Doyen's location. Fast. The Void Serpent materialized 15 meters away. It was beautiful and terrible. Its body seemed to exist in multiple places at once, scales that reflected colors that should not exist. It was 5 meters long with no visible eyes, but Doyen could feel it watching him. He stood up slowly and pulled a net from his backpack. It looked handmade, woven from silver thread with knots tied in complex patterns. Quantum-locked knots, Doyen said quietly. Grandma learned it from her grandmother, who learned it from a monk who used to catch demons. You tie the knots in a specific pattern while thinking about stability and permanence. Makes things that exist in multiple dimensions get stuck in one. He threw the net. It spread wide and fell over the serpent. The creature tried to phase into another dimension, but the net held it in place. The more it struggled, the tighter the knots became. 20 minutes after the trial started, Doyun walked back to the checkpoint carrying a bag that writhed and hissed. He set it down in front of the officials and yawned. "Done," he said. "Is there food here? Real food, not the paste stuff on the ship?" The officials stared. The crowd was silent. The other hunters were still in the ravine, searching with their advanced equipment and finding nothing. HFY returned 3 hours later, empty-handed and furious. Lysandra came back an hour after that, confused about how she had missed the serpent. Gormith's pack had tracked false trails for hours. Ralvex had detected 17-dimensional anomalies, all of them wrong. In the command center, scientists were reviewing the footage frame by frame. They could not understand how the simple tools had worked. The music box should not have created dimensional tears. The net should not have held a creature that existed outside normal space. But it had worked, and the galaxy had watched it happen. Doyun sat in the waiting area, eating tteokbokki that Jiwon had found at a Korean restaurant run by a tentacled chef who had studied Earth cuisine. He scrolled through his phone, looking at messages from his friends back home. "How did your grandmother learn these techniques?" Jiwon asked, sitting next to him. "Her grandmother taught her," Doyun said, "and her grandmother's grandmother taught her. It goes back a long time. Korea has always had monsters, things that came through cracks in the world. Someone had to deal with them. But none of this is in any database. No military records. No scientific papers," Doyun shrugged. "We didn't advertise. People who saw monsters were called crazy, so we stayed quiet and did our job. Kept people safe. That's all that mattered." On the main broadcast screen, the rankings updated. Doyun's name appeared at the top. Number 1. The human from the primitive planet who should not have stood a chance. The galaxy was starting to realize that Earth might be more dangerous than anyone had guessed. The news of Doyun's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. Within hours, billions of beings were watching replays of the human teenager casually capturing a void serpent with a music box and a handmade net. The forums were full of arguments. Some said he had cheated. Others said it was luck. A few suggested that Earth had secret technology they were hiding. None of them guessed the truth. That the methods were older than most spacefaring civilizations. The second trial was announced 2 days later. The hunters would track a rift stalker through the Crimson Wastes, a desert where the sand itself was alive and hungry. The sand would try to eat anything that moved slowly, and time flowed differently in different parts of the desert. A minute in one spot could be an hour somewhere else. Rift stalkers were worse than the void serpents. They hunted by creating temporal loops, trapping prey in the same moment over and over until they were too exhausted to fight back. Then the stalker would strike. They were fast, intelligent, and nearly impossible to track because they barely left any trace in normal time. Before the trial, HFY approached Doyun in the preparation area. The Krill warrior loomed over him, all 4 arms crossed. His mandibles clicked slowly, which Jiwon had learned meant he was trying to be intimidating. "Human," HFY said. "Your first victory was luck. This trial requires real skill. Real strength. You should withdraw before you embarrass yourself." Doyun was half asleep in his chair. The trial started at 6 in the morning, which he considered a crime against humanity. He looked up at HFY with eyes that were barely open. "Are you okay?" Doyun asked. "You're making a weird clicking sound. Do you need medicine or something?" Several of the other hunters' support staff tried not to laugh. HFY's mandibles clicked faster, which meant he was angry now. "I am giving you a warning," HFY said. "Cool. I'm going back to sleep." Doyun closed his eyes. The trial began at dawn. The hunters were released into the Crimson Wastes. The red sand stretched to the horizon in every direction, shifting and moving like ocean waves. The temperature was extreme, hot enough to kill an unprotected human in minutes. Good thing Doyun had environmental protection from his suit. HFY deployed his equipment immediately. Heat sensors, motion trackers, temporal distortion detectors. His people had been hunting for thousands of years. They knew every trick. Lysandra phased into shadow, moving across the desert without touching the hungry sand. She was searching for temporal anomalies, the signature of a rift stalker's hunting ground. Gormeth's pack spread out in a wide formation. Their telepathic link meant they could cover massive areas and share information instantly. If one saw something they all knew, Ralvex reconfigured their sensors to track time distortions. They had upgraded specifically for this trial. Their processors were running calculations at speeds that would make Earth's best computers look slow. Doyen pulled out a cheap compass and a piece of chalk. Jiwan was watching from the command center again. She had stopped being surprised by what Doyen pulled out of his backpack, but she still did not understand how any of it worked. "What are those for?" she asked through his earpiece. "Grandma's technique," Doyen said, kneeling in the sand. He started drawing symbols with the chalk. They looked like a mixture of Korean characters and geometric patterns. Circles within circles with lines connecting them in specific ways. "The Rift Stalker creates temporal loops," Doyen explained, his voice flat with the tone of someone explaining something obvious. "Everyone is trying to track the loops. But that's the trap. The loops are the weapon, not the prey." He drew more symbols. "Temporal predators don't actually move through time differently. They make you move through time differently. They stay in the present. They just make everything around them repeat. So you don't track the time distortions. You track the only thing that stays constant." "Which is?" Jiwan asked. "The ground it walks on." Doyun tapped the compass. "This belonged to my great-great-grandmother. It has iron from a meteorite that fell in Korea 300 years ago, before the Joseon dynasty ended. Grandma said old iron remembers where it has been." He placed the compass in the center of his chalk symbols. The symbols make the iron more sensitive. It tracks magnetic field consistency instead of changes. Everything in a time loop changes except the physical ground. The stalker has to walk somewhere real. Jiwan watched as Doyen moved across the desert, stopping every few hundred meters to check his compass and draw more symbols. It looked random. No pattern she could see, but he was moving with purpose, following something. The other hunters were having problems. Thexfor had been caught in a temporal loop. His sensors showed him tracking the same piece of ground for what felt like minutes but was actually hours. By the time he realized what was happening, he had wasted half the trial. Lysandra found a temporal anomaly and investigated. She got trapped in a loop where she kept finding the same anomaly over and over, each time thinking it was the first time. Her shadow-walking abilities could not help her escape from looped time. Gormeth's pack was split up. 3 of his beasts were stuck in different loops, their telepathic link creating feedback that confused all of them. The remaining 3 were searching blind, trying to track something that left no scent in normal time. Ralvex's sensors were overloading. Too many temporal distortions, too much data. Their processors could not filter out the false trails from the real one. They had prepared for everything except the possibility that the stalker would create hundreds of false loops as camouflage. Doyen stopped walking. He looked down at his compass and then at the sand around him. The magnetic field here was different, consistent in a way that did not match the temporal chaos everywhere else. "Found you," he said quietly. He reached into his backpack and pulled out what looked like a small cage. It was made of bamboo, held together with silk rope and what appeared to be salt crystals pressed into the joints. It looked like something from a history museum, not a hunting trial. Doyen set the cage on the ground and opened the small door. Then he pulled out a piece of dried fish from his backpack and placed it inside the cage as bait. "You're kidding," Jiwan said from the command center. "You're using fish as bait?" "Rift stalkers exist in the present," Doyen said, "which means they get hungry in the present. They need to eat real food, and this fish was blessed by a monk and dried with salt from the East Sea. Grandma said blessed food attracts things that exist between worlds because it has stronger, I don't know the science word, stronger presence maybe?" He sat down 20 meters from the cage and waited. 15 minutes passed. The Rift Stalker appeared. It materialized slowly, testing the area for danger. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Its body was long and sleek, covered in scales that seemed to flicker between moments. It had 6 legs and a head that was mostly teeth. It smelled the fish. Moved closer, stepped into the cage to grab the bait. Doyen pulled a string he had been holding. The cage door snapped shut. The bamboo bars started glowing with a faint golden light. The stalker tried to phase into a temporal loop, but the cage held it. The bamboo was old, Doyen's grandmother had told him, cut from a forest that had been growing for 500 years. The silk rope was made by hand using traditional methods. The salt was harvested during a specific tide. Old things made the old way did not bend to new tricks easily. The creature snarled and struggled, but it could not escape. 45 minutes into the trial, Doyen walked back to the checkpoint carrying the bamboo cage. The Rift Stalker hissed at everyone who got close, but it was secure. He set it down in front of the officials and stretched. "Can I take a nap now?" "I'm tired." The crowd was silent again. Then the cheering started. Not from everyone, but enough. Some species were starting to see something in the human that they recognized. The old ways. Methods that had been forgotten in the rush to advance and modernize. The other hunters returned hours later, all of them empty-handed. Thexfor was furious. His equipment had failed. His training had failed. He had been bested twice by a child using toys. Lysandra studied Doyen from across the room, her black eyes unreadable. She was starting to understand that the human was not lucky. He was trained. Trained in ways her people had forgotten. Gormeth approached Doyen cautiously. "Your methods are strange," the Drevnir said, his telepathic voice echoing in Doyen's mind. "But effective. How did you learn to hunt like this?" "My grandma taught me," Doyen said simply. "She taught me what her grandma taught her. We've been doing this for a long time. But you have no technology. No advanced tools," Doyen shrugged. "We have tradition. We have knowledge passed down. We have things that work, even if we don't always know why they work. Sometimes that's enough." In the command center, Federation scientists were arguing. How could bamboo and salt hold a temporal predator? How could a 300-year-old compass track something that barely existed in normal spacetime? None of it made sense according to their understanding of physics, but the replays did not lie. It had worked. The rankings updated. Doyen was number 1 again. The primitive human from Earth, the teenager who looked annoyed and tired. The boy who hunted with his grandmother's tools. The galaxy was starting to realize something important. Maybe being primitive was not the same as being weak. The third trial was different. The Federation officials announced it with grave expressions. This time the hunters would face a phantom brood, a collective organism that existed as many bodies but only one mind. It could split into hundreds of individuals or merge into one massive creature. It was intelligent, aggressive, and dangerous enough that 3 hunters had died facing it in previous competitions. The hunting ground would be the Shattered Peaks, mountains that phased randomly between solid matter and pure energy. One moment you could be standing on solid rock. The next moment that rock would become lightning or plasma or something worse. Hunters had to track the brood while the world around them was constantly changing states. The pressure on Doyen was building. Galactic media had become obsessed with him. Every newsfeed showed his face. Articles analyzed his methods. Scientists debated how his simple tools could work. Some called him Earth's secret weapon. Others said he was a fraud who would eventually fail. The betting pools were split almost evenly. The other hunters were no longer dismissive. They studied his previous trials. They looked for patterns, for tricks, for anything that would explain his success. But all they saw was a tired teenager using items that should not work. The night before the third trial, Thexfor came to Doyen's quarters. The Krill warrior stood in the doorway, his massive form blocking the light from the corridor. His mandibles clicked softly. "Human," Thexfor said. "I have a proposal." Doyen was lying on his bed eating ramyun from a cup. It was his 4th cup that day. The station food was terrible, and he had brought 20 cases of instant noodles from Earth. Jiwan said it was excessive. Doyen said it was survival. "What?" Doyen asked, not looking up from his phone. "We split the victory," Thexfor said. "Tomorrow, you capture the brood. I capture the brood. We both claim success. We share the honor. In return, you teach me your methods." Doyen finally looked at him. "No." Thexfor's mandibles stopped clicking. "You refuse?" "Yeah, I'm not here for honor." Doyen went back to his noodles. "My government promised my grandma they'd pay for her medical treatment if I competed." "That's it. That's the only reason I'm here. You would reject this offer for something so small?" Doyen's expression changed. For the first time since arriving at Vornex's prime, he looked genuinely angry. "My grandmother is dying of cancer. She taught me everything I know. She protected people her whole life and nobody even knew she existed. The medical treatment costs more money than my family will ever have. So no, it's not small. It's everything." He set down his noodles and stood up. Even though Thexivor was twice his size, Doyen did not back down. "Get your own grandma, or learn to hunt without trying to cheat." Thexivor left without another word. His mandibles were clicking rapidly now. a sign of deep humiliation. Jiwan had watched the encounter through the security feed. She found Doyen an hour later on the observation deck staring out at the artificial stars. "You made him angry," she said. "Good. He was annoying." Doyen did not look at her. "Do you think my grandma is okay?" "I haven't been able to call her in 3 days. The communication lag is too long." "The doctors say she's stable," Jiwan said softly. She had been getting daily updates and passing them to Doyen. "The treatment is working. She asks about you every day," Doyen nodded. He looked very young suddenly, not like a hunter who had captured impossible prey, just like a 17-year-old kid who was scared for his grandmother and far from home. "I want to go home," he said quietly. "One more trial after this one," Jiwan said. "Then you can go home." The third trial began at dawn. The hunters were released into the shattered peaks. The mountains were beautiful and deadly. They rose thousands of meters into the air, their peaks glowing with different colors as they shifted between states. Solid rock would become blue plasma. Ice would become golden light. The ground beneath their feet was never certain. The phantom brood was already hunting. Its many bodies moved through the peaks like a coordinated swarm. Small creatures about the size of house cats covered in black fur with too many eyes and sharp teeth. They worked together with perfect precision because they were all one mind. Thexfor deployed his hunters with military efficiency. He had brought backup this time. A full krill hunting team. They moved through the peaks with weapons ready, using technology to predict which parts of the mountains would be solid and when. Lysandra used her shadow walking to move through the peaks without touching them. She could exist partially in shadow, which meant the changing matter states could not hurt her. It was a smart strategy. Gormeth's pack was reduced to 3 beasts now. The others were still recovering from the temporal loops of the last trial. But 3 was enough. They moved carefully, using their telepathic link to warn each other of danger. Ralvex had upgraded again. New sensors, new processors. They had studied recordings of phantom broods for days. They knew every behavior pattern, every hunting strategy. Doyen sat down on a rock that was currently solid. "You're doing the thing again," Jiwan said through his earpiece. She was getting used to this. "I need to make a call," Doyen said. He pulled out his communicator. Not the fancy Federation device they had given him. His regular phone from Earth, modified to work with the long-range relay. "A call? Now?" "Yeah, give me a minute." He dialed a number and waited. The lag was terrible, almost 6 seconds each way, but eventually someone answered. "Hello?" A woman's voice speaking Korean. "Hana? It's Doyen, Grandma's grandson." "Doyen! Your grandmother said you would call. Are you still in space?" "Yeah, listen, I need something." "Can you get me the dancing drum of Myeongdo? The one at the temple in Jeonju?" There was a long pause. "That drum is sacred, very old. The monks guard it carefully, I know. But I need it. Tell them it's for Han Masuk's grandson. Tell them I'm hunting a collective spirit. They'll understand." Another pause. "How will I get it to you?" "You're in space. There's a military officer here named Park Jiwan. She has clearance. She can arrange transport." Jiwan was listening to this conversation with growing concern. "Doyen, what are you planning?" "Something that sounds crazy," Doyen said. "But it'll work. Trust me." 6 hours later, through a combination of military transport, diplomatic immunity, and several confused customs officials, a traditional Korean shaman's drum arrived at Vornexus Prime. It was old, made of wood and animal skin, decorated with symbols painted in faded red ink. Doyen took it into the shattered peaks and began playing. It was not music exactly. It was rhythm, a steady beat that echoed through the mountains in a way that seemed impossible. The sound carried farther than it should, clearer than it should, like it was traveling through something other than air. The phantom brood heard it. All of its body stopped moving at the same moment. "What is that?" Ralvex asked over the shared communication channel. Their sensors were picking up the sound, but they could not identify what was creating it. Doyen kept playing. The rhythm was specific. His grandmother had taught it to him. She had learned it from her mother. A pattern passed down through generations of Korean shamans who dealt with spirits that existed as many parts of one whole. The brood's bodies started to stumble. They moved independently for the first time, confused, their coordination breaking down. The telepathic or psychic or whatever connection that linked them was being disrupted by the drum rhythm. How was he doing that? Lysandra whispered, watching from the shadows. Doyen did not stop playing until all of the brood's bodies were separated, unable to communicate with each other. Then he pulled out strips of paper from his backpack. They were covered in written prayers in Korean, blessed by monks from 3 different temples. He moved through the peaks, capturing each small body individually. He wrapped them in the prayer papers and tied them with red thread. Each one was bound separately, secured, made harmless. It took him 3 hours to capture all of the brood's bodies. When he returned to the checkpoint, he was carrying a large bag that wriggled and chirped. He set it down in front of the officials and looked at Ji-won. "Can we go home now?" The officials could not speak for a moment. They reviewed the footage, the drum, the papers, the thread. Nothing made sense according to their understanding of biology or physics. Thexvor had found only 5 of the brood's bodies. His team had captured them using advanced containment fields and sedatives. It had taken 6 hunters working. Together, Gormith had captured 3 using his pack and telepathic coordination. Lysandra had captured 2 using shadow nets and precision. Timing Ralvex had captured 7 using specially designed traps and predictive algorithms. Doyen had captured all of them, alone, using a drum and prayer papers. The other hunters gathered around the footage replays watching Doyen work. They were starting to understand something. The human was not using technology. He was using something older, knowledge that their own species might have had once before they advanced and forgot the old ways. "Your grandmother taught you this," Gormith said. It was not a question. "Yeah," Doyen said. He was eating ramyun again. "Her grandmother taught her. It goes back a long time. Korea has always had spirits that split into many parts, possessive spirits that jumped between bodies. Someone had to know how to handle them. But how does a drum disrupt a telepathic link?" Doyen shrugged. "Grandma said sound is vibration. Vibration affects everything." The announcement of the final trial brought silence to the entire galaxy. The Federation was bringing out a dusk tyrant, one of the 13 primordial predators that had existed since before most civilizations learned to make fire. Creatures so old and so dangerous that they were myths made real. Dusk tyrants hunted fear itself. They fed on terror, grew stronger the more their prey was afraid. They could create illusions pulled from nightmares, manipulate shadows into weapons, and exist partially in a dimension where fear lived as a physical thing. In the entire history of the Federation, only 2 had ever been captured. Both times required teams of the best hunters. Both times hunters died. This would not be a team trial. That would be suicide. All the remaining hunters would work together to capture the tyrant. No rankings this time. Just survival and success or failure. The night before the final trial, Doyun sat in his quarters looking at pictures on his phone. His grandmother in her hospital bed smiling even though she looked weak. His younger sister Somi at her school performance dressed in a traditional hanbok. His friend Taemin sending messages asking when he would come home. Everyone looked so far away. Jiwon knocked and entered. Over the past weeks, she had gone from being his handler to something closer to a friend. She sat down across from him. "Are you afraid?" she asked. Doyen looked up. For once, he did not try to hide it. "Yeah, I'm terrified. You've captured everything else. 3 impossible trials. This is different." Doyen put his phone down. "The other creatures were dangerous. This thing is ancient. It's existed for millions of years. It's seen civilizations rise and fall. It knows every trick, every strategy, every way prey tries to survive. So what will you do?" Doyen was quiet for a moment. "Grandma taught me something when I was 12. When I caught my first real monster. She said fear doesn't make you weak. Running from fear makes you weak. Fear is just information. It tells you something is dangerous. What you do with that information is what matters. What did she tell you to do with it? Use it, accept it, walk forward anyway." He looked back at his photos. Fear is a human inheritance. We're descended from prey animals, things that got hunted by bigger, stronger predators. But we survived because we learned to use fear as a tool. We got scared and then we got smart. The final trial began at dawn. The hunters gathered at the entrance to the Twilight Expanse, a realm of eternal dusk where reality was thin and nightmares could bleed through into the physical world. The sky was forever caught between day and night. The shadows moved on their own. For the first time, the hunters worked together. They established a base camp and planned their approach. Thexvor contributed his tracking technology. Lysandra scouted ahead using shadow walking. Gormith's remaining pack provided early warning. Ralvex calculated approach vectors and danger zones. Doyen sat away from the group, quiet and still. He was not ignoring them. He was preparing in his own way. The dust tyrant's presence hit them before they saw it. A wave of pure terror that made experienced hunters freeze. It was like every nightmare they had ever had became real at once. The air itself felt wrong, heavy. Watching, Dexivor saw his entire tribe dead, his homeworld burning, everything he had ever cared about destroyed. He dropped to his knees, his forearms shaking. Lysandra saw herself failing her first assassination mission over and over. The target she was supposed to kill but could not. The shame she carried. The doubt about whether she belonged among the elite. Gormith saw his pack turn on him. His own bonded beasts tearing him apart. Their telepathic link twisted into a weapon that broadcast his death to his entire species. Ralvex's processors overloaded with error messages. Every calculation resulted in their failure. Every simulation showed their destruction. Logic itself became a nightmare. Doyen saw his grandmother dying alone in a hospital. No family there, no one holding her hand. He saw his sister crying at the funeral. He saw himself arriving too late, having failed the one person who mattered most. But he kept walking forward. The tyrant materialized from the shadows. It was massive, 3 times the size of Thexfor, with a body that seemed made of living darkness and old bones. Its eyes were countless, scattered across its body, glowing with a pale light that hurt to look at. It had existed for millions of years, hunting fear across 1,000 worlds. It focused on Doyun, the human who was afraid but would not stop. The prey that refused to run. Doyen reached into his backpack with shaking hands. He pulled out a small mirror. It was old and cracked, wrapped in yellow paper covered in his grandmother's handwriting. A reflection talisman, used by Korean shamans to show spirits their true nature. He held it up toward the tyrant. The creature paused. In the reflection, it did not see its physical form. It saw what it truly was. An ancient being, yes. A predator, yes. But also alone. Eternally alone. The last of its kind. Hunting because hunting was all it remembered how to do. "You're just an old ghost, aren't you?" Doyen said quietly. His voice shook, but he did not run. Still hunting because it's all you know. Still feeding on fear because fear is the only thing that makes you feel alive. The tyrant moved closer. Its many eyes focused on this small human who should be running or frozen in terror, but instead stood and spoke. Doyen switched to the ritual language his grandmother had taught him. Old Korean shamanic words. Words for speaking to powerful spirits. He did not speak as prey. He spoke as an equal. "I'm afraid of you," he said. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not. Fear is honest. Fear means I understand how dangerous you are, how old you are, how powerful." The tyrant tilted its massive head. "But fear is also information," Doyen continued. "And the information tells me that you're tired. You've been hunting for millions of years. You've outlived everything you knew. You're not evil. You're just alone." He lowered the mirror slightly. "I can bind you here, trap you like a specimen in a cage. The Federation will keep you locked away until they find some use for you, or you can come willingly and I promise you won't be caged. You'll be honored, kept safe until they find you a proper sanctuary, a place where you can rest." The other hunters watched in shock. The human was negotiating with a primordial predator. Not fighting. Not fleeing. Talking to it like it was a person. The dusk tyrant stared at Doyen for what felt like hours. Then slowly, carefully, it lowered its massive head, a gesture of acknowledgement. Maybe even respect. Doyen stepped forward. His hands were still shaking. He pulled out a piece of paper with symbols written in his grandmother's careful handwriting. A binding mark, but not a prison. A contract. An agreement between hunter and hunted. He placed the paper on the tyrant's head. The symbols glowed with soft golden light. The creature did not resist. "Thank you," Doyen said quietly, "for trusting me." The tyrant followed him back to the checkpoint. Not captured through force. Not trapped or sedated or broken. It walked beside him by choice. The galaxy watched a 17-year-old human make a contract with a nightmare that had existed. Since before their civilizations began, the Federation officials did not know what to say. There were no words in any of their languages for what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Vex Talim approached Doyen after the ceremony. The competition was over. Earth's representative had won not through force or technology, but through understanding and respect for the creatures he hunted. The Federation offers you everything, Vex Talim said. Citizenship, training, a position as Master Hunter. Wealth beyond measure. You could live here. Teach our hunters. Change how we understand hunting. Doyen looked at the ambassador. No thank you. No. I just want to go home. My grandma needs her medicine. My sister has a recital next month. And I have finals I'm probably going to fail because I've been in space for a month. But you could have anything you want. I want to go home, Doyen said simply. That's all I've ever wanted. The payment was transferred to his grandmother's medical fund. Earth received full Federation membership. Scientists across the galaxy began studying human hunting traditions, shocked to discover thousands of years of knowledge they had never imagined existed. Doyen returned to Busan on a cold morning in November. He took the subway home from the airport carrying his jingling backpack. Everything looked exactly the same. The street vendors selling tteokbokki, the students rushing to school, the old men playing baduk in the park. His grandmother was waiting at their small apartment. She looked better, stronger. The treatment was working. She smiled when she saw him and pulled him into a hug. Did you do well? She asked. I won, Doyen said. But it was exhausting. I'm never doing that again. Good boy, now eat. You look too thin. His sister Somi came home from school and showed him her homework. His friend Taman called and complained about all the classwork Doyen had missed. Everything was normal and perfect and exactly what he needed. 3 days later, Doyen went back to school. His teachers gave him makeup assignments. His classmates asked questions about space. He told them it was boring and the food was terrible. That night, his Federation communicator buzzed. A message from Thexfor, the Krill warrior who had tried to intimidate him, who had been humiliated by a human teenager. The message was short. Would you teach me? I can pay. Doyen looked at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, maybe, but I'm expensive. And I have homework to finish first.